Hello, everyone, and welcome to From Surviving to Thriving, where we don't just talk about all of the pretty aspects of business, we talk about the things in between, the challenges, the mindset shifts, and all of the struggles that go into owning a flourishing, awesome, successful business. My name is Robin Carr. I'm an award-winning motivational speaker, author, and mindset coach, and I am super excited to have with me today Tracy Nicholas. She is the founder of Folkloring Life, where she is an instructor in the school community and as well as a fellow author and podcaster. So, Tracy, thank you so much for being a part of our show today. Please, and tell us a little bit about what inspired you to get started in this type of work.
Well, it sort of developed naturally. I always knew, I think I spent my entire life leading up to writing the book that I did, and a lot of different experiences that I've had over my life. As far as the folklore and magic part of it, those have always been interests in my life. And I originally, oh God, 7 years ago, got hired onto the Folklore podcast as the theater and film correspondent. And so I started learning how to interview people and started doing that kind of work in something that I had a strong background in because I was a stage manager for over a decade. And so I decided at a certain point, there's something missing out there in the world. Because when I look at folklore podcasts, it's either people telling stories and they just talk about these traditional stories, they tell the tales, right? Or they are talking about an academic view of it. And I went, the missing piece here is like, how do people actually incorporate some of these folklore traditions into their lives so they can connect with their ancestors, with the land around them, with, their sort of those older skills and that kind of thing. And and the stories, right? Because we take our stories with us. We have family folklore, we have cultural folklore. And so how do you incorporate it into your life to have a more magical life? And so that's when I decided to kick off Folkloring, my podcast. I actually do have a second podcast called Dark Lore, but that's just a pet project with a friend. Um, so yeah, so I just thought there was something missing. I thought it was something interesting to do to show people, even though they have very busy lives, that they can incorporate some of these ideas and some of these skills into their life.
Okay, wow, that is amazing. And I love that you have blended, like your past experience with what you're passionate about. I think that's the perfect blend for all of us, truthfully. So with all of that passion, is there one part or one aspect of what you do that just really gets you excited, or is it just all of it together?
I do love the writing part of it. It's fun. It can be difficult, and like anybody, I can get imposter syndrome and all of that. I think the thing that I love most, and the reason why having a community for folkloring life in school is because I like connecting with people. I like interviewing people. If I could do that all day, I would love it. I like having conversations with people about sort of spirituality and those kinds of things. And yeah, I mean, I like presenting. And so, as I'm going to be going on a whirlwind book tour coming up soon, that'll be fun. So I get to see more people in person because it's almost always now on, Zoom or some sort of live. So yeah, that's the part I think that excites me most. And my last business that I was working on was very sort of solo. I did it by myself out of my house, and it was great. It carried me through 10 years, but it was very like I didn't need to talk to anybody for the most part.
Oh, I don't know how it, I used to work at home and like I still had meetings, but like I still had to talk to people. I don't know what I would have done not talking with people for that extended period of time. That's impressive.
Yeah, I started in 2016 and it's funny because by the time we got to lockdown, everybody was freaking out. And I was just like, same, my
It's
life is
normal.
exactly the same. Yeah.
Mine was not. Wow, that's crazy. So this whirlwind book tour, is that like national, international? Like, tell me a little bit about that. That sounds awesome.
Well, at first, they're gonna focus me locally. I don't know. I haven't heard if I'm gonna go international. The book is distributed worldwide.
Okay.
So, there's certainly that possibility. I'm just sort of waiting for my publisher to tell me what they want me to do. But I'm in Chicago, they're based out of Chicago. So it was just easy to start doing some local stuff. So I'm pretty excited about that. And I'm also doing a bunch of podcasts for it.
That's so exciting. And let everyone know, what is the name of your book? Because I think it's awesome.
It's called Mind Over Magic, magic with a K at the end. And it is about the way that we think about magic and the way that we think about our beliefs around what magic is and is not, and looking at sort of some of the scientific basis for stuff that we believed, 10 or 20 years ago to be magic or woo-woo or whatever. But we have some actual hard science that supports some of what we would have believed as just magic, even, like I said, even 10 years ago. And I won't, I'm really careful about not going into like pseudoscience. And I say right up, I don't think that we can prove whether or not ghosts are real, for example, right? Because we don't have the science to understand what consciousness is. Like, we don't know how the brain works and why do I have my personality and you have yours? And we don't even understand how we put people under when they're gonna, have surgery. We have no idea the mechanism, right? So if
Mhm.
we can't really know what consciousness is, we cannot prove that consciousness can live past death,
Right.
right? Maybe someday we can, but that day is not today. And so I won't speculate on those sorts of things. And in that case, I sort of put on my folklorist hat because when you're talking about people's beliefs from a folkloric perspective, it doesn't matter if they're true or not, right? It just matters what people believe and why they believe it. And, that's why one of the reasons that superstitions are so powerful is because people believe them, right?
Hmm.
And so, uh, when I'm looking at things that I don't think there's any science there for, I really start to talk about psychology and how people approach different things. I mean, hear these stories of like in Ireland where they will move a road so it doesn't, disturb the fair folk, right? And that's like they're like, fairies probably aren't real, but let's not take a chance, right?
That is so
So,
interesting. I have studied just a little bit in that realm, and I've never heard that. So that is very, very interesting to me. Um, so you mentioned that you do all of these different things and you have all these different avenues. What is, what are some of the challenges that you face within these different avenues? And then, like, how do you work to overcome those? Because I can imagine that there's a lot of difficulty with working with people's beliefs and even their spirituality for sure.
mhm. It's funny because working with people's beliefs, and I really thought I spent most of my career in corporate America. Um, and I think that I thought for a while, like, maybe I won't publish this book under my real name because if I ever need to go back to corporate America, hopefully I won't. But if I ever do, like, people are going to think I'm crazy, right? And so I started just talking to people about it.
Mhm.
Again, back to the talking. And what I found is a lot of my colleagues that, are just like from the construction industry, or I worked in strategic planning for a while. They were like, oh, yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And this happened to me, and that happened to me. And people coming up with ghost stories and having seen cryptids and like lots of different stuff that people are really open to it. And so I think that the vocal majority are people on one end or the other of the spectrum, right? We've got complete skeptics. They're like, none of that is possible. It's not true. Then you've got like true believers, and they believe in everything out there, right? But I think most people are somewhere along that spectrum. And so finding, those conversations is just meeting people where they are. And I'm happy to do that. And so I think that more so where my difficulty comes in is in sort of and I create my own problem, and I have done this my whole life. I get very bored with doing something if I'm not like learning something that I have no idea how to do. So I have jumped careers to many different I started as a stage manager, I worked in construction, then I got my master's in strategic planning and started doing that. Then I became a game designer, and now I am where I am, right? And so each one of those jumps required me to learn a whole lot. And so that's the difficult part for me is that I'm on this learning curve and I have to figure out all the pieces and parts. And I want to be able to do it myself because I don't want to be dependent on someone if like my website goes down at, midnight on Saturday night. Um, but so I'm trying to learn all of these things while I'm frustrated that like everything isn't further along than it is. Like it should all be done right now, and then I can get back to the teaching and the things that I love. And instead, I'm troubleshooting on my like Substack account.
Gotcha. No, yeah, makes perfect sense. I'm right there with you. So I've learned a lot in that same realm too. And I too jumped around multiple careers because I wanted to just keep learning. I was just hungry for knowledge. So I
Right.
absolutely get it.
Hmm.
Um, so when a person either joins your community or they read your book or they reach out to you to have like a conversation with you, um, what is it for you that is like, okay, this person now has X, like a greater understanding, or like what is the end goal for someone who is either utilizing your services in some capacity?
Hmm. I think that the end goal is, first of all, to have a safe and comfortable way to talk about some of this stuff because people who start to talk about spirituality that is not part of, the big three religions, they are often treated as if like they're crazy or they're weird or whatever. And so being able to share whether it is experiences, whether, some sort of, weird thing happened to them and they're trying to process it, or whether they're looking to connect in a way that either connects them with their past and their ancestry or connects them with the land around them and helping people to be able to feel more comfortable with it and see, as we're talking, like lots of people are somewhere on the spectrum, right?
Mhm.
And see that they're not that weird, that a lot of people have these beliefs because we see lots of the same kinds of beliefs worldwide throughout all cultures. Everybody's got some after death belief system, just to stick with that theme. Whether it's that people have an afterlife, whether there are spirits here, there are beliefs like these everywhere you go because we tell stories about what is important to us. And so what I'm trying to, forge in my community is a place to have those conversations, but also a place to learn how to do some of these things. Because in a lot of ways, and I define folklore pretty broadly. It's any tradition or story or, anything that you do that is shared amongst a group of people, right?
Okay.
And so, yeah, I mean, because that is what we do with folklore is we're telling stories about whether it's a family story of like, oh, you'll never believe, what happened this one Christmas, and that's why we have this ornament now. There's lots of stories. I actually interviewed a woman who told me about the time that her grandfather met the devil. And this was like dead serious conversation, right? And so being able to understand how to tap into your spirituality that is maybe not mainstream but probably more mainstream than you think it is. I think that that's really what I want people to experience when they're either taking my classes or joining the community and just having a conversation.
I absolutely love that. And I think that's true in like all walks of life, where if we know that we are not alone in whatever it is, whether it's our beliefs or what we're experiencing or whatever,
Mhm.
I think it's so there's power in numbers. Everybody tells us that. And the fact that you have created like a safe place for people to, even if they're just curious, it sounds like, even if they're like, hey, I don't really know what I believe, but this sounds like a good place for me. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think that there are people, again, who have had experiences that aren't defined by in like what our mundane world tells us should be, right?
Hmm.
And there are too many experiences like that to just say, oh, this one person was imagining it, right? You hear lots of stories of UFO abductions, or you used to hear stories about fairy abductions, which to me is the exact same story, just with better technology. And when you start to look at the parallels, you can see, obviously people weren't talking about space travel,
Hmm.
100 years ago or 200 years ago. And so those fairy stories helped explain, like just experiences that we have that don't seem to make sense. And, do I know what was really happening? I don't know. Maybe they ate some hallucinogenic mushrooms and they had this experience and they were gone for days and everybody was worried. And then it grew into stories like, Rip Van Winkle, who's gone for 100 years, right? Those stories grow over time. And folklore is a living thing. So I think that, yeah, I mean, it's just experiencing those stories in a way that helps us share with each other. Because that's the thing about folklore is at a certain point, about 120 years ago, maybe a little, maybe 150, we stopped telling stories to each other and we started getting people collecting stories. And then those stories became the official version, right? The Grimm brothers, Anderson. And those were the stories. That was it. That was the real story, right?
Right.
But, it's problematic because those stories were gathered by people who were upper middle class, white, typically male, not always. And so they had a perspective when they were retelling that story and capturing it. And even later, when we started getting like Disney, I mean, those are basically sanitized versions of what the Grimm brothers and Anderson were telling, and those were real to us. We had an
Hmm.
authority that told us this is what this fairy tale is.
Hmm.
And so we started believing that. I think that it's a really lovely time right now. And, technology can be a curse and a blessing. But because we are starting to talk to each other again in conversations like this, like we would never have been able to have this conversation, what, 20 years ago, 30 years ago,
Mm-mm.
maybe. So I think that we're now once again connecting on that level, but people have forgotten how. And I want to help them remember how to do that, how to tell their stories, listen to other people's stories, incorporate, when people are in diaspora, right? They have stories from their heritage, but then they change if the land around them is different. And so those stories to me are really fascinating, but people don't tell them very much. They're like, "Oh, I can't. I'm not a good story." It's like, let's just talk about it and tell me what happened to you and help people develop that particular muscle of storytelling is fun and magic is fun. And looking at magic in a way of like, no, you're not crazy if you believe this,
Hmm.
because like let's talk about it. And I cite things in my book like the placebo effect, right? And the placebo effect, so basically you take a pill, but it's completely inert for whatever condition the study is about, right? And some people get the real medicine, some people get the placebo. But Then the body, after knowing that they've taken this pill, the brain just decides to heal the body,
Hmm.
right? That is the placebo effect in essence. And the funny thing about the placebo effect is it even works if the person knows it's a placebo. And there is something about that ritual of taking a pill that is firmly ingrained in our brains that taking a pill helps. And so it does help. And I think, when I look at magic, I define magic as changing the physical environment, either within you or outside of you, as without any mechanical intervention. And so, and you can say, oh, well, there's the placebo effect is only within your own body and, your brain and body work together and all of that. But we've got lots of examples of people exchanging energy and examples that are not, oh, this energy healer, but
Hmm.
examples more like you go to a concert and it's a great concert and everyone's like, oh my God, the energy was so good. And you can also go to a concert and it's technically perfect, but it like falls flat
Hmm.
or a play or whatever. And we have all had that experience. And that's us exchanging energy. We're and it builds on itself. And so that's like so we can if when we can prove these things, they're more comfortable to be able to talk about them.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense to me. So two last questions, really quickly. So for anyone listening, what would you say is one piece of advice that you would share for them or share with them, like where they are right now or what they're believing in or anything like that? Just one piece of advice.
I think that for people who feel like it's hard to talk about an experience, there are lots of ways to support your spiritual beliefs and life without necessarily having to advertise it or put it on blast, right? I've got 5 altars in my house, and you can't tell. I mean, it looks
Hmm.
like decor. And so, and I don't want my aesthetic to be all like woo witchy, Um, but my altars are important to me. And so I have them out where people can see them. I've never had one person be like, "Is that?" They're just like, "Oh, that looks really cool."
Hmm.
So there's lots of ways that you can incorporate it, even if all you can do is think about the symbolism of certain acts that you have in life. Think about liminality and liminal spaces when you walk through a doorway, right? Stir your food in a clockwise direction and imagine how it's going to nourish your family in the future. And so you can incorporate it in a lot of ways, even if you're not finding people who make you feel safe to discuss it with.
That's awesome. I love that. And yeah, I don't think anybody should be ashamed of whatever they practice or do, or, that's their own,
Right.
to each their own.
Yep.
So last question, and I always say that I believe this is the most important one. So for anyone listening right now, if they are like, Tracy, thank you, like I need this space in my life, how do they get in touch with you?
You can go to my website, which is folkloringlife.com. And from there, you can springboard to my Substack. If you like the blogging format, you can get to my school community. You can find my book. You can find the podcast. I also do book reviews of folklore related books in there. And and I do reviews of films as well. So you can find everything at folkloringlife.com.
Awesome. Fantastic. Well, Tracy, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on today. I have actually learned a lot. So thank you so much. And for anybody else, if you are in the middle right now, you're not behind, you are becoming. And that is what thriving actually looks like. Bye, y'all.